I want you to think about how many vehicles pass you or drive near you on a long highway drive without you ever registering a single one of them individually. Dozens, sometimes hundreds over the course of a few hours. Cars, trucks, motorcycles, a constant anonymous stream of strangers moving in the same general direction as you, none of them memorable, none of them meant to be. I want to tell you about the drive where one of those vehicles stopped being anonymous, where a truck I had no reason to remember became something I could not stop watching for across 3 entire states over the course of a single, very long day. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that I am a 29-year-old woman, and 8 months ago, I drove from my apartment outside Denver, Colorado, to my parents' house outside Omaha, Nebraska. A drive of roughly 8 hours, most of it along Interstate Highway, the kind of trip I had made a handful of times before without incident. This is the story of the truck that would not stop appearing. I have made this same drive, or a version of it, at least a dozen times over the years, visiting my parents, coming home for holidays, the kind of trip that becomes routine enough that you stop thinking of it as a journey and start thinking of it simply as a long, slightly tedious errand between two familiar points. I know that stretch of interstate the way you know a route you've driven many times, not every detail, but enough of the rhythm of it to notice when something breaks that rhythm. I noticed the truck for the first time about 90 minutes into the drive, somewhere in eastern Colorado, still well within familiar territory. It was a standard semi-truck, dark green cab, nothing distinctive about it beyond a small decal on the door that I could not quite make out from that distance. It stayed behind me for a long stretch, not tailgating, not doing anything that would have alarmed anyone in the moment, simply maintaining a consistent distance in the same lane, the way trucks and cars often do for long stretches of interstate when traveling at similar speeds. I stopped for gas about 2 hours in, just over the Nebraska border. I did not see the truck at the gas station, and I did not think about it again as I got back on the highway. About 40 minutes later, merging back onto the interstate, I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw a dark green truck cab several car lengths back with what looked like the same small decal on the door. I told myself it was a different truck. Dark green semi-trucks are not unusual. Decals are not unusual. I had no specific reason at that point to believe I was looking at the same vehicle, rather than simply one of thousands of similar-looking trucks that travel that same interstate corridor every single day. The second stop was where the coincidences started to feel less comfortable. I pulled into a rest area about 3 hours into the drive, still in Nebraska, planning to stretch my legs and grab a coffee. As I pulled into a parking spot, I saw a dark green semi-truck parked at the far end of the lot, engine idling, the same small decal visible now that I was close enough to actually read it, a regional trucking company logo. Nothing sinister in itself, simply a company name and a small graphic I did not recognize. I told myself again that this was not unusual. Trucks stop at the same rest areas along the same interstate corridors constantly for the same reasons any driver does: food, fuel, a break from hours of driving. There was nothing inherently strange about a truck I had seen 90 minutes earlier also needing to stop at a rest area roughly 90 minutes later. But I did not get out of my car right away. I sat there for a few minutes, watching that dark truck in a way I would not normally watch a stranger's vehicle, waiting to see if the driver would emerge, waiting to see anything that might make the coincidence feel less like a coincidence. No one got out. I eventually went inside, got my coffee, and got back on the road, telling myself I was overthinking something completely mundane. By the time I crossed into Nebraska's far eastern edge, closer to Omaha, I had seen that same truck a third time, and a fourth, each time at a different location, a different gas station, a different stretch of highway, but each time unmistakably the same vehicle, the same decal, the same dark green cab. I want to be honest about the specific quality of unease that settles into you at that point. It is not the sharp, immediate fear of an obvious threat. It is something slower, more corrosive, the growing uncomfortable awareness that a stranger has been present, consistently, across a drive spanning hundreds of miles and multiple stops, in a way that no longer fit comfortably into the category of coincidence, no matter how many times I tried to force it back into that category. I called my sister, hands-free, somewhere around the 4-hour mark, more to hear a familiar voice than because I had a clear plan. I told her about the truck. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said the thing I had been avoiding, saying to myself, "That's not normal, Jess. Trucks don't do that." I told her I was probably overreacting. She told me to call her back in 30 minutes regardless, just so she'd know I was okay. The fifth time I saw the truck, it did something none of the previous encounters had done. I had pulled into a rest area just after dark, close enough to Omaha now that I could have finished the drive without stopping again, but rattled enough by that point that I wanted a moment to collect myself before continuing. I parked toward the well-lit center of the lot, near several other vehicles, deliberately choosing visibility over convenience. The dark green truck pulled in a few minutes later. It did not park near the other trucks in the section clearly designated for large vehicles. It pulled into a car-sized space almost directly across from mine, engine idling, headlights on for several long seconds before switching off. I sat in my car, doors locked, hands shaking slightly on the steering wheel, watching that truck the way you watch something you are genuinely afraid of, trying to decide whether driving away immediately was safer than staying in a lit, populated area with other people nearby. The driver's door opened. A man climbed down from the cab, mid-50s, heavy-set, wearing a company jacket that matched the decal on the door truck, and started walking, unhurried, directly toward my car. I did not roll my window all the way down. I lowered it perhaps 2 inches, my other hand hovering over my phone, already prepared to call 911 the moment anything about this felt like it was escalating. He stopped a good distance from the car, hands visible, held slightly out to the sides, in a way that I understood, even in the moment, was a deliberate attempt to look non-threatening. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to scare you," he said. "I've been trying to get your attention for the last hour. I didn't want to flash my lights or lay on the horn on the highway. Figured that'll scare you worse." I asked him, my voice not entirely steady, what he wanted. "Your left rear tire," he said. "I noticed it a couple hours back at that last rest stop. There's something wrapped around the axle near it, looked like a wire or a strap of some kind, tangled up tight. I've seen it happen before, usually road debris, but it can work its way in and cause a blowout at highway speed if it's not dealt with. I've been trying to catch you stopped somewhere to tell you, but you kept pulling out before I could get over." I did not know in that moment whether to believe him. I asked him to stay exactly where he was, and I called my sister back, and I told her what he'd said, and she told me to call the Highway Patrol non-emergency line immediately and ask them to send someone to the rest area before I let anyone near my car. A state trooper arrived within 15 minutes. He listened to my account and to the truck driver's account, and then crouched down beside my rear tire with a flashlight, while both the driver and I stood at a distance, watching. There was, in fact, a length of thin cable. The trooper's best guess later was a discarded section of guardrail cable debris, wound tightly around the axle housing near my left rear wheel, close enough to the tire itself that it had, according to the trooper, likely been slowly working its way toward the tire's sidewall over the course of several hours of highway driving. Another hour, maybe two, at highway speed, the trooper told me, and that's a blowout waiting to happen, possibly a bad one, depending on what lane you were in when it let go. I stood there in that rest area parking lot, feeling a very specific, very disorienting mix of emotions. Relief that I was not in the danger I had spent the last several hours convinced I was in, and something close to shame at how frightened I had been of a man who had, as it turned out, been trying to help me the entire time. The truck driver, whose name I learned was Daryl, was gracious about the entire misunderstanding in a way I don't know that I would have managed in his position. He told me he understood completely why a woman alone being followed by a truck for hours on an interstate would assume the worst. He said he almost hadn't stopped at all, worried about exactly this reaction, but couldn't in good conscience let me keep driving on a tire that might fail at 70 miles an hour. He told me, standing in that parking lot with the trooper's flashlight still cutting across the pavement between us, that this wasn't the first time something like this had happened to him professionally. Drivers noticing a hazard on another vehicle and trying, unsuccessfully, to signal it without causing alarm. He said most truckers learn, eventually, that flashing lights or laying on a horn reads as aggression long before it reads as warning, especially to a driver traveling alone, and that there isn't really a good, universally understood way to say something is wrong with your car from inside a different vehicle at highway speed. He'd simply been trying to find a moment at a stop where he could get close enough to explain calmly, and every time he'd gotten near, I had already been pulling back onto the highway. I thanked him. I don't think "thank you" fully covered what I felt in that moment, but it was what I had. I want to be honest about what I took away from that day, because I think it's more complicated than a simple lesson about trusting strangers or not trusting strangers. Everything I felt during those 8 hours, the mounting dread, the phone call to my sister, the decision to keep my window mostly up and my phone ready, was, I still believe, the correct response to the information I had at the time. A vehicle appearing repeatedly across hundreds of miles at multiple stops is a legitimate reason for caution, regardless of how that specific situation eventually resolved. I do not think I overreacted. I think I responded appropriately to genuinely ambiguous information, and I got fortunate that the explanation in this particular case turned out to be someone looking out for me rather than someone hunting me. But I also want to be honest that both things can be true at once. My fear was reasonable. Daryl's intentions were good. The tire could have failed catastrophically if he hadn't been patient enough to keep trying across multiple stops to get my attention safely. If you are ever in a similar situation, a vehicle appearing repeatedly across a long drive, trust your instinct enough to take real precautions. Call someone. Stay in lit, populated areas. Keep your phone ready. Do not assume the worst is impossible, and do not assume it is certain either. And if you are ever the one trying to warn a stranger about something wrong with their vehicle, know that the person you're trying to help has no way of knowing your intentions, and approach with exactly the kind of patient, visible caution that Daryl did. Sometimes the thing following you across 3 states is exactly the danger it feels like. Sometimes it's someone trying to keep you from becoming a different kind of statistic entirely. You will not always know in the moment which one it is. All you can do is stay alert, stay safe, and let the people meant to verify these things, the police, the highway patrol, do exactly that before you decide either way.